There's 7 o'clock. Welcome to a long overdue stream. I think the last one I did was about a year ago, and that was on new releases, which are now so old that they're irrelevant. So this one's on the Phoenix Kings tier list. I'm apparently the only one who's really well into Phoenix Kings. I thought I'd do it myself because everyone's going to come in and say, "Oh, Malekith's the true king," which he's clearly not. The chat's already got here. Thanks, Stan. Uh, Apparently, there's only one tier of Phoenix King, which is Malekith. And then he says, "I'm off for some quality time with your mother," which is something that Malekith would say. Rob's on for hashtag the one true Phoenix King, hashtag the Eternity King, and hashtag Malekith. So I appreciate your pre-stream support generally, but not the content of what you're saying specifically. There we go. Well, anyway, this is just a bit of fun because I like tier lists. They're very straightforward and easy to do. And for some reason, putting things in order of how good they are or you think they are, I don't know. I like watching them, so I'll do one for the Phoenix Kings. I've rapidly tried to relearn how OBS works, so let's see if this actually does anything. There we go. There's the tier list. So we have got S tier, A, B, C, and F tier. There's only 11 Phoenix Kings, so it's not going to be like they're going to be crowded in each tier. Some are better than others. Some are not very good at all, and some, I don't know, some that are really outstanding. I don't know how many of them are actually S tier, but there's a few candidates for F. So I thought I'd go through a bit of lore about what the Phoenix King is. I'll go through them all in order. So there's Anarion, Belshazzar, Calador I, Calador II, Caradriel, Tethlas, Bel-Cohadrus, Aethys, Morviel, Bel-Hathor, and Finibar. So there's only 11 of them. Some of them get really short reigns. Like I think Anarion's 80 years. Some of them get 1100 years worth of reign, which is Bel-Cohadrus, I think. So Phoenix King goes back. Anarion's the first one. Prior to that, there isn't a king. It's the Ever Queen rules. Uthuan. That's when they're all fluffy and hippie and living in one with nature. Weren't very martial. Polar gates collapse. Demons and chaos invade the entire Warhammer world. They invade Ulthuan. There's some more Vale love already. Yeah, so the polar gates collapse. The world is infested with demons. They attack Ulthuan. The elves are not ready for it, having lived in some at one with nature or whatever it was. Anarion's dwarves will feature in some part of this. That's later. In one of these kings is maligned unnecessarily for his negotiations with the dwarves. We'll get to him. So the Ulthuan's attacked. It's not a military state. The demons and agents of chaos just wreck it. Anarion's a itinerant traveler who has been traveling the world. He comes back when this disaster occurs. He offers himself as a sacrifice to Assyrian at the Temple of Assyrian in the Inner Sea. He walks at the flame. Instead of being incinerated, he's imbued with power of Assyrian, which enables him to take on the demonic invasion. That's the first Phoenix King. That's how it all starts. So I'll start with Anarion. He is clearly S tier. This should really be Anarion tier, but that's a bit of a giveaway for where he would go. Everything that happens on Ulthuan is pretty much down to him. He sets the precedent for how the elves rule themselves. The Phoenix King role is invented for him. he sets how the Phoenix King's chosen. He becomes imbued with the power of Assyrian, which all the rest of them go through the same process of walking through Assyrian's flame. He starts the tradition that the Phoenix King marries the Ever Queen, which produces the line of Ever Queens, because the Phoenix King and Ever Queen's first daughter automatically becomes the next Ever Queen. He unifies the kingdoms. They're not unified with one single state, but he unifies them into a single purpose. He's the one that goes and makes the elves a martial race. So these, again, like I've said previously, that the reason I like the high elves is that they're quite different to how elves are depicted in other fiction, and they've actually, in my opinion, become better than that almost by accident. So the elves are an extremely martial race. They give up all of that fluffy, at one with nature stuff for the most part, to become a properly disciplined martial race, which they then use to destroy chaos. So Anarion's just a amazing fighter. He forges the elves into a fighting race. He gets the priests of Vol at the Temple of Vol at Calidor to start forging loads of magic weapons, and he pushes back the demonic invasion. He does have a dip in his character after about 100 years of warfare, something like that. People start to realize that the demonic invasion isn't actually stopping. And he has an argument with his friend Calidor Dragon Tamer, who's probably the greatest mage of the era. Calidor wants to bet it all on trying a vortex to remove magic from the world, whereas Anarion doesn't want to do that because he thinks it's a risk not worth taking. He just wants to keep the armies up and keep attacking the demons. Unfortunately, after one demonic invasion, Anarion's wife and children, definitely his wife, he thinks his children are killed. They're actually not, by demons. That sends him over the edge, and he goes to draw the Widowmaker, which is the sword of Cain. Which apparently, as he's traveling to it, the Chaos Gods tell him not to do it. Spectre of his dead wife tells him not to do it, and he ignores them all, draws the sword of Cain, dooming his bloodline for eternity. So with that, he's got the power of Assyrian, having walked through the fire, and the power of Cain, drawn Cain's sword, which makes him more or less a god. Unfortunately, after that, he starts his court in Nagaraith, around Anlek. And that court descends into cruel. That's like the elves, which have become so obsessed with warfare and killing, who follow Anarion and not that bothered that he's drawn the sword. So there's an extended time where he goes off the rails. That's where he marries Morathi, which isn't very good for the future of the Warhammer world. So he marries her. He has another son, Malekith, who some people find quite popular. And that goes on for a bit. There's another massive demonic invasion. Calidor says that he's going to do the vortex thing, whether or not Anarion lets him, which gives Anarion no real choice. He has to defend his friend who does this ritual in the middle of the Inner Sea. They manage to get the ritual started. That's when Anarion kills 4 greater demons, pretty much one after the other. Calidor manages to do the vortex ritual. Magic's drained out of the world. The demons fade. Anarion's mortally wounded. I think in a great character arc, he realizes what he's done's wrong. He gets back on in Draupnir, which is his dragon, flies back to the Blighted Isle, puts the sword back, and dies, and they never find his body. But true tragic hero. But you can't give him anything less than S tier, because he set the whole thing up. He's killed 4 greater demons. he rallied the elves. He saved the world effectively. Yeah, he had a rough patch, probably. Oh, I've just been rescued from a Saleshi warband. Let's get married. He fell for that. Fair enough. But I think he's done enough to earn an S tier. And I think where's the book? I think he only gets 80 years on the throne. Reading a book on a stream's not great. Yep, 80 years, most of which are fighting. So it's not really a great time to be alive if you're just a normal elf, because you're gonna get attacked by a demon or something. But I suppose the fact that he's there is long term. You're probably gonna be all right. You're not killed. So that's an Aryan. So who's next? Belshazzar. Right. So after the death of an Aryan, the princes they pick another Phoenix King. Malekith is a candidate as an Aryan son. They decide he's grown up uh, in Nagarith, which has been an extremely violent and unpleasant place. So they think he might be a bit too unhinged for to be the king. So they pick Belshazzar instead. I think he's from. Where is he from? I did all the research for this. I'm quickly scanning through the High Elf book. Oh, he's from Tiranoc. He distinguished himself in the war, yet was seen as a voice of peace and reason. They're sick of war at this point, so they don't want another militaristic king. So they pick him. Call myself a high elf player. I know I like to give the impression that I've got this entire book memorized, but that's that's all a facade. Look, right. I'll address Malekith at the end, right? How they should have dealt with Malekith, because there's a way that you could have written that that wouldn't have been so stupid. So I'll address that at the end. Anyway, Belshazzar. Basically, during that time, not much happens. The elves reassemble the civilization. This is where they set up the colonies, where they start having a. It's typical higher politics, knowing the Malekith problem. It's not. Well, it is a problem, but there's an easy fix to it. It's just the stupid resolution they went with. That's the problem. Right. Belshazzar, so he does a load of exploration and colonies. This is where they start interacting with the dwarfs for the first time, swearing these oaths of perpetual friendship. I'll not spoil how that ends up. Malekith at the time is used as a ambassador, so he points him to. He does a lot of wandering around the world like his father did, and he's also the ambassador to the dwarfs, who he gets on very well with their king. Um, I don't know what. Can you boot these heretics in the chat? No, because there are only uh, 6 people in the chat, 5 of whom are hardcore Dark Elf supporters. So can't really get rid of them unless I want to talk to myself. Uh, so on this, the trade increases, the colonies increase, the elven population increases. This has a big impact on trade and wealth, and people start getting a lot richer. Belshazzar rules for quite a long time. Where are we? 1,670 years. We're getting to the War of the Beard. During this time, because it's quite peaceful and people are getting a lot of luxuries and that, this is when the cults of pleasure start springing up. So these are elves given into whatever lusts and desires they have. Malekith's mother is one of them. She's behind the scenes on that. Malekith comes back and pretends to be outraged that these cults of pleasure are spreading. He decides to investigate them and stamp them out, which the king is pretty all right with. And then, in a massive turn of events that surprise no one, he gathers a big council of the princes and says, actually, Belshazzar is a big chaos worshipper, and poisons him, which not everyone's all right with. So I'm going to put Belshazzar at a C tier because I don't think he really does, other than not starting any wars, he doesn't really do anything. It's a peaceful reign, fair enough. He doesn't really do anything that wouldn't have happened anyway. The elves, they were going to rebuild the civilization and expand and set up colonies. So, and he trusts Malekith, which is a big mistake. Like, he's taken what Malekith clearly thinks is his job, even though he says, no, I'm not bothered about it. He doesn't like the fact that Morathi is a secret chaos worshipper or in the cults of pleasure. He doesn't see that as suspicious that Malekith is pretending that he's going to root them out. So he's not great. Basically, he just gets played, and he doesn't see it coming, and then he gets poisoned. So it's I can't really give him that higher marks actually. I think he's F tier because he's just there. He doesn't do anything that ruins the nation or anything until the end, where he walks into being poisoned. So yeah, I think he's C tier. So the next one is Calidor the First. Where do I put Calidor? You'd think S tier because he saves, basically rescues the nation from collapsing. Well, so after they're poisoned, this is the important bit that everyone misinterprets about what happened. So Malekith poisons Belshazzar at the Shrine of Assyrian, and then claims to be king, walks into the flame of Assyrian and gets incinerated because Assyrian doesn't want him to be king. All this rubbish about if he'd stayed in 2 seconds longer, he'd have got through. That's just bullshit. So Malekith gets put back out on the side that he entered the flame on, which means he's not the king. Assyrians rejected him. These supporters take his body away, and that's when the split in Elven civilization happens, or the first one. So all of Malekith's followers in Nagaraith, they start attacking the loyal elves, high elves now, and because they haven't got a king, they're pretty much, they don't know what's happening, don't know what's going on. There's a prince called Imric, who's the grandson of Calidor Dragon Tamer, who set up the Vortex. He's one of the few ones that are left. So the princes that are left. So a few, like the captain of the Phoenix Guard, the priest of the Temple of Assyria, and a few others, whoever's left, agree that he should be the next king. So he goes through the flame. Everything's fine. He doesn't get incinerated, which means he's the rightful king. And he starts the fight back against what would end up being the Dark Elves. He renames himself after his grandfather, Calidor. And he's yeah. So during his reign, this is how great and balanced and what a good king Malekith would have been. He tries to unbind the vortex, which probably would have sank Uthuan with all the destruction that would have come onto. He fails at that. The mages inside the vortex don't let him get away with that. And it's under Calidor's reign that he manages to push the Dark Elves out, and they set up their own civilization in Nagaroth. But there's still there's still a lot of dark elves around in Nagarath at the top of Ulthuan. So he's in sort of perpetual war with them. Calador constructs the Griffin Gate, the Phoenix Gate, the Eagle Gate, the Dragon Gate, and the Unicorn Gate. So he's puts the defensive ring, which stops them getting through to the inner kingdoms. Um, so it's he's a good king in that situation went tits, and he managed to put the wheel back on. So I think I'll put Calador. I think he's A tier. Um, yeah. I, I don't think he's as good as an Arion, but he's certainly the right man at the time. To save Ulthuan. Um, he manages to reclaim the Blighted Isle, which is where the where the Widowmaker is on the altar of Cain. He doesn't draw the sword, which is probably for the best. Good character from him. As he's coming back from the Blighted Isle, the Dark Elf sorcery manages to split off his ship, and he's attacked by Dark Elf raiders. But instead of when he realizes it's hopeless, he jumps off the ship and kills in his armor and kills himself. Doesn't want to be captured by the Dark Elves. So a heroic end for a good king. So he got 552 years. So another war king. Yeah, I think A is fair for him. So the next one, which is his son, Calador II. Now, uh, he's much maligned, but I think it's very unfair. So the council, Prince's Council, decide they might see what the hereditary principle's like. Calador the First was pretty good, so Calador's son presumably is going to be all right as well. Calador the Second becomes the Phoenix King. The biggest issue in his reign is the Dark Elves start dressing up like High Elves and attacking Dwarven trade caravans, which the Dwarf King isn't really happy with. The Dwarf King doesn't understand that there's been a civil war or a split, which again is a failure of his intelligence services or whatever the Dwarf equivalent is. He doesn't understand what's happened, which is his own fault, so he just blames the High Elves. Their ambassador goes to the Phoenix King demanding compensation for the attacked caravans. So if you're the Phoenix King and you see this dwarven lunatic come up to you demanding money, well, that's not how you talk to a king. So quite rightly, he orders the ambassador to be shaved. What's the line? Something like that. The Phoenix King doesn't answer demands. I don't know. There's some saying about it. So this apparently is a big diplomatic upset in Dwarfland. I've no idea why. So he sends the ambassador back shaven, which is a big thing in dwarf culture, apparently. So that means it's war. So the dwarfs attack all of the colonies that exist in the old world, which I think is roughly where Britonia is now. It starts this big war of the beard. The dwarves call it the War of Vengeance, but no, it's the War of the Beard. It's a bit of a stalemate that no one can really get a big advantage because the dwarves can hide in their dwarven holds, which you have to take a big long siege to get them out. Calador II takes over at one point, which doesn't go so well. They're funneling more and more um, elves and the military into the War of the Beard, which is draining the manpower from Ulthuan. He takes over. He duels the Dwarf King's son, whose name I can't remember. He kills the Dwarf King's son, but later on he is killed himself by the Dwarf King. Is it Starbreaker? Gotrek Starbreaker, the Dwarf King. Can't remember. Chat will know. Rob will know. Rob, who's the Dwarf King at this point? It's Snorri Harfan's son, and I think it's Gotrek Starbreaker who's the king. Sorry. So yeah. Sorry, something's just come up on the. Oh, it's gone now. Yep. So Dwarf King kills Calador in a duel, steals the Phoenix Crown, and apparently that means you win the war, which that's dwarves writing their own rules of war there. Just because you steal the crown doesn't mean you've won the war. They run back to their dwarf holds, lock the doors, and say, "Yeah, we won that." Um, so, I mean, he should be S tier really, because he treated the dwarves the way they should be treated. However, see, he drained Ulthuan of a lot of manpower, damaged the colonies. Belshazzar C. Calador F. Yeah, he's probably F. Subjectively, I like Calador, even though nobody else does. But yeah, he's probably F tier. Ulthuan wasn't in a good condition after he was the king, so yeah, we'll have it as F. That was Starbreaker, yeah, I thought it was. Right, so the next one's Caradriel. So at this point, the Ulthuan has got no king. It's in the middle, embroiled in a Vietnam-style war on the old world. They're trying to do a final siege of his Karazakarak, the big dwarven city, which realistically they're not going to achieve. But the generals at the time are trying to do it to reclaim the Phoenix Crown. So the council meets again and they vote in Caradriel, who is not a military man. I think he's a Safri. Is he a wizard? Let's have a look. Oh no, he's from Yvres. So he's not a particularly good soldier, but he's a very good ruler. So his thing was this war is a waste of everybody's time. He ceases the war immediately. The generals sort of go a bit mad with that because they're saying it's a big insult to leave the Phoenix Crown with the dwarfs. We need to get it back. He says he'd rather lose the crown than lose the realm. He's not bothered about it. He just says make a new one. He starts withdrawing the armies from the old world, and he recalls all the colonists because at this time Malekith has invaded Ulthuan, which is sort of his big plot, which is probably another reason Calador's F tier because he walked right into it. He was intending to start this war between the dwarves and the elves, which are the two big powers at the time, to make sure that they were both ruined and then he could invade Ulthuan with no problem. So all the armies are in the old world. Caradriel recalls them and the colonists because he can't sustain the armies over there anymore and fight the Dark Elves when they're coming through to Ulthuan. Most of them are obey and come back. A few of them don't want to come back to Ulthuan. They're happy where they are. They go on to become the Wood Elves, but he doesn't order them to be forced to come back or anything. He just he says, "All right then, it's sad, but we'll leave you to it." So he's a very pragmatic king. He realizes he's not a particularly good general, so he appoints a load of very experienced military men to lead the armies. One of which is Tethlis, who's coming up shortly. And they managed to hold the Dark Elf invasion and push it back. How long does Caradriel go for? He gets 604 years. That's pretty good. Yeah, so he relies on Tethlis and a lot of other generals to do all the fighting planning for him. They start relieving the sieges of the Griffin Gate and pushing the Dark Elves back towards Anlek, and that's where they sort of hem them in. So they sort of hem them in around Anlek and Nagaraith, or the Shadowlands as it is at that point, I think. And again, he just sort of hems them in and is a good king, a good ruler. Manages to sort out the mess after the War of the Beard. And then I think he's the first Phoenix King to die peacefully in his sleep. So I think he's probably 8 here. B. Is he better or worse? Is he better at this? Sorry, is he the same or worse than Calador? Probably the same. Do elves die of old age? Yes, they do. How long does he reign for? He's reigned for 600 years, and he must be pretty old at that point. It says they're functionally immortal, but I don't think that's actually true. There's a few of them die of old age. They don't get ill. I've read that somewhere. They don't suffer illness. Tethlis is next. Tethlis is the next one made Phoenix King, who's been Caradriel's best general. His family were killed by Dark Elves previously during the. Assuming it'll be just after the War of the Beard. So he hates Dark Elves, and he's a military genius. So he manages to reign for 306 years. So he plans a meticulous war against the Dark Elves to push them completely out of Ulthuan. He starts assembling new armies. This is sort of where the Elven cities start required to have training fields so that the armies can be trained quicker. He gets the army up to it's sort of recovered all of its losses from the War of the Beard, and he just starts pushing the Dark Elves completely out of Ulthuan. But he's brutal. He doesn't take prisoners. He puts cities to the sword. He absolutely hates Dark Elves. Does he destroy Anlek? Yeah, he does. He manages to destroy Anlek, so they lose their last big city on Ulthuan. And he salts the fields, so even the High Elves are thinking this guy's There's something a bit off about this guy. They're not usually used to butchering the entire occupiers of cities, but Tethlis sees that's how he's going to win the war. Um, so the Dark Elves still hold the Blighted Isle. He goes out to reclaim it. He does manage to do it. Again, there's a lot of attrition in taking the Isle off the Dark Elves. He goes onto it, and there's two stories to this. He either goes to Shrine of Cain, and while he's contemplating the Widowmaker, a Dark Elf assassin pops out and kills him. Or he's going to the shrine and he's about to draw the sword, and his White Lion bodyguards kill him rather than risk that happening. I think the White Lions killed him because his next action was to invade Nagaroth with his fleet. So I think, considering the fact that he despises Dark Elves, I think he probably was going to draw the sword. And he probably would have killed an assassin, so I don't think that's believable. So Tethlis. See, he's a really good. He's B. He's a really good general, and he did what was needed to be done. But he probably would have descended if he'd ruled any longer. He probably would have descended into bloodlust or some more. So yeah, I think he's probably a B tier. Is he better? Is he the same as Calador? He's better than Belchanor. He's probably a better general than Calador. Definitely better than Caradriel. And he left the realm in a better place than he left when he took over it in, because the dark. I'm going to say B. Maybe B plus. But there's only 11, so I'm not subdividing that. So the next one is Belcahadris, who is. And now he is a mage, I'm sure of it. Oh, yes, he's a mage from Safri. He's the first king for a long time who there isn't really that much to fight. So the Dark Elves have been shattered at this point. Tethlis has almost wiped them out. They've ran back to Nagaroth. So there's no real big war for Belcahadris to fight. So he starts rebuilding over from Caradriel, Tethlis's reign. The kingdoms have sort of been wrecked due to constant invasions, drafting of men for the army. All of the Anuli Mountains around the center of Ulthuan, around the middle. There's loads of monsters and things coming down from there because there's no nobles and militias to kill them, so they start to become a problem. So he declares a age of renewal, and that's how he keeps these nobles and things alert and still trained, even though there's no wars going on. He sort of makes it a thing where killing a load of monsters is going to get you far on the in the court. His major achievement is construction of the White Tower of Hoeth, and founding the Order of Lawmasters. That takes about 1,000 years to build, and he reigns for 1,190 years. I think they just managed to build it before he dies. So that's sort of formalizing the training of magic. He starts the Order of Lawmasters, and the Sword Masters who go out to investigate cult of pleasure activity. So nothing really much happens in his reign, but he's just an all-around good king. He rebuilds the realm, rebuilds the kingdom, institutes some reforms to start the Tower of Hoeth. He keeps the nobles occupied with martial pursuits. Assassins are like weapon skill 10. Yeah, but Tethlis is weapon skill 11. With hatred, dark elves. So if you were going to pick a time to be alive under any of them, you'd probably pick Belgahadris. There's no war. The realm's healing. The nobles are occupied with killing beasts. The dark elves aren't really much of a problem. I think he's probably CS tier. Because this isn't just on military things, this is like civic administration. I'll put him at A. Yeah. Because if he hadn't done, like, started the Sword Masters and that would have had a very negative effect later. So he's quite far-sighted. What was that blind elf from Mordheim called? I don't know. Eltharion was blind in a retcon storyline, but they changed that, so he wasn't that anymore. I don't know who that was. Priests of Vol are blind. Was he one of them? Yep, so that was Belcahandris. Sorry, Belcohadris. Good king. The next Aethys. You know that thing where it's, what is it? Hard men create good times create soft men. That's Aethys, I think. Aethys is a poet. Because Belgahadris has overseen 1,000 years of peace where nothing militaristic really has happened. They tilt towards, they don't really need warriors or anything like that. So they give it to, he's Aethys the poet. He's a poet and singer, and all he was interested. This is the high point of elven culture, apparently. So he gathers artists, singers to his court. He likes the theatre. He starts aesthetics start becoming important, so they redo the Griffin Gate, I think. So they put sculptures on the Griffin Gate. He's a great patron of the arts and stuff. However, they totally neglect the army. I think he spends the navy budget on, I don't know, theatre productions or culture or something like that. So they start thinking that, well, we don't need. Oh yeah, there is no D&E. There's not enough of them. There's only 11, so it goes straight from C to F. Eltharion was a lad, hung out with Gobos, cool dude. Isn't Eltharion why goblins have got fear of high elves? Eltharion was blind in 6th edition. Yes, he was, and then they retconned it. I think it's better that he's not the blind one. The elf from Mordheim was Ainur, Sword of Twilight. Did not know that. It's a learning experience. Yeah, so Aethys spends the military budget on cultural things. At this point, the cult of pleasure starts picking up again, and it because we're in a sort of Yeah, it's a bit more. You say it. He's not bothered about the military. Nobody's keeping an eye on, um, keeping a watch on the Dark Elves. Nobody's keeping a watch on the Cult of Pleasure except the Sword Masters. Uh, the princes stopped thinking that martial prowess is how you show your worth to the elven society and how you get ahead. They start thinking that putting on plays and witty epithets is the way to get ahead, and that's backed up by Aethys because he's not a military man. Um, People who try to maintain the military traditions, they start becoming, uh, they start losing their place at court. Um, and the people who want to continue the military and keeping things in order with that, they lose their influence at court. So the cult of luxury, that's it. That starts to spread. Lots more elven aristocrats join it. Um, the swordmasters report all this back uh, to the Lord Master at the Tower of Hoth, who sees that there's a massive conspiracy going on and it's getting quite dangerous. Oh, hello. I was watching Musco's stream last night. Painting Eldar. Space Elves, that's appropriate. Where are we? Goblins just think elves are unnatural and smell funny, so they fear them. Complete logic, yes. If Grom is your general, I think the fear elves rule doesn't apply with his leadership bubble. I thought it was because it's either Eltharion or because they're so um ethereally fast that they just fear them. But don't know. Depends who you believe. Uh, right, yeah. So Aethys, eventually the High Lawmaster works out that there's a conspiracy going all the way at the top. He goes to report it to Aethys, and at which point it turns out that the Chancellor is a secret Chaos Worshipper, a Cult of Luxury member, and he just stabs Aethys through the heart. So that's how he ends. So he's definitely F tier. What's that thing out of Batman where he says victory has defeated you? That's Aethys' reign. Uh, well, there's some Morvale fanboys in the chat, so he's coming up next. Morvale's he is the lawmaster who works out that the cults are back, so he gets made the next Phoenix King. Um, he's quite his story's quite sad actually. He initially, when he's made king, he orders a large invasion of Nagaroth just as because he thinks that's something that you're supposed to do. Um, uh, they haven't looked into what Nagaroth's like. They just assume they're on the edge of destruction. So they just think, oh, that'll be a morale building thing. We'll go and invade Nagaroth. It doesn't work out very well, and the fleet is destroyed. So they didn't realize that the Dark Elves hadn't nearly gone extinct. They're actually still going. Um, and because the army in that had been so run down under Aethys, it causes a crisis of military manpower. So Morvale invents the citizen levy system that's still going now. So every high elf has to be trained in bows and spears and has to serve when the king orders them to. So he comes up with the nation under arms concept of the elven forces. Um, that's because they've totally run out of soldiers at that point. The Dark Elves counter invade and rebuild Anlik. Um, I think this is where they crash dark black arcs into the coastline to start building the city again. Um, So he's similar to Caradriel. Morvale realizes he's not a particularly good general, so he appoints Menthius to be supreme commander. He's a general from Calador. He's a very talented military commander. Um, he also spends all he nearly bankrupts the realm rebuilding the navy, um, because it's practically gone at this point. He starts using the swordmasters to seek out the cults of pleasure. Um, he's not particularly good at the the difficult parts of ruling. He doesn't like sending people to die. He doesn't like signing death warrants for cult of pleasure devotees. He doesn't like um, taking losses in war. So he sort of sinks into depression. How long does he go for? So 383 years. Um, so yeah, they. What else does he do? Yeah, he founds the Fortress of Dawn and the Citadel of Dusk. After he increases the navy, it's just so they can patrol the world with the High Elf navy, just so they can start stopping the Dark Elves from invading the rest of the world. What else does he do? Yeah, so the Witch King um, starts to destroy sanity. Malekith, by some magical means, infiltrates his dreams and starts giving him uh, visions of doom and destruction. So they go to try to destroy Anlek. Morvale's waiting on the Shrine of Assyrian. He thinks that because of his visions, that the war's hopeless and he's going to lose it. Menthius gets killed, but his dragon goes berserk and breaks the back of the Dark Elf army. So they manage to destroy Anlek again. But when he finds out that Menthius is dead, he's had enough, and he walks back into the Flame of Assyrian and commits suicide. But apparently, it takes 12 hours for him to do that. Uh, yeah, he just sits in the flame for 12 hours, and then his ashes scatter across the inner sea. So he's quite a tragic character, Morvale. I don't think he was bad. His first invasion of Nagaroth was a bit of a disaster, but after that, BT better than Belshazzar. Just doesn't have confidence in himself. Someone needs to tell him you're doing a good job. Keep doing it. I think he's B tier because a lot of what he does um, is important later on. The levy system, rebuilding the navy, rebuilding the army. He does oversee the destruction of Anlik again. I think I think he's B tier. Next, Bel Hathor. I think he's another wizard. Oh, well. Yes, he's a wizard from Safri. Uh, Apparently, he's a bit of an eccentric, and they pick him because they think he's going to be easily manipulated. But it turns out they're wrong. He sorts out the remaining infighting that's gone around the court of the Phoenix King since Aethys has ruled. They want him to push him to invade Nagaroth again, because after the previous invasion's been broken, they think they've got a real chance of destroying the Dark Elves completely. He refuses because at this point he realizes that that's an extinction level event for elves, and that they probably could win, but there would be practically nobody left after. So he didn't want to risk the extinction of the race. So he stops that military expedition from happening. He's also responsible for the mists, the magical defenses on the east side of Ulthuan, which stop ships landing on the shore. It makes it extremely difficult or impossible to navigate. He's responsible for that. He's the first one really to deal with the rise of the Empire and Bretonnia. The other kings have been able to ignore them, but the realms of men start becoming more important and more influential. They realize that they're not just savages that they were thousands of years ago. They've actually developed their own civilization. So he uses so he appoints Finnubar, who's later is the prince of Etain, and he goes on a big diplomatic mission to speak to the Empire and Bretonnia. Goes to Athol Loren to see what's happened to the Wood Elves, and he comes back and tells them that they're not they developed their own civilizations, and he rescinds his order that any human that sets foot on Ulthuan is to be killed. He allows them to come into Lothen, and that's where Lothen starts to become a massive trading hub. So he starts to he's not so keen on them, but he can see the way the world's going, and starts making the change to accepting diplomatic relations with the realms of men. So that's as a result of that, trade increases. Lothen becomes a massive trade port, and he starts allowing humans into Lothen as a diplomatic measure. So he rules for 661 years, and he died of old age as well. So that's two. Where would I put Bel Hathor? C's too harsh. I mean, he didn't really do anything wrong. He just didn't really do all that much. Yeah. Is he a Belshazzar character? Probably better than Belshazzar. He's not as good as Tethys. He's probably not as influential as Morville. So yeah, I'll put him at C. And then the last one is the current king, Finnubar. He's Bel Hathor picks him to be the next king, or recommends him to the council, which is apparently controversial because it's never been done before. But that's probably just because the princes wanted to appoint somebody else or themselves. So he gets to be the next king. He has to deal with massive amounts of chaos invasions, the temporary loss of the Ever Queen, massive Dark Elf invasions. He wins the Battle of Finnival Plain. He still does his trips abroad. He's a big diplomat. His thing seems to be just to gather the correct heroes in a certain place and get them to save Ulthuan or execute his will or whatever. So he gathers Teclis and Tyrion. He's got Corhill, the White Lion captain. So I think he's just gathering mighty elven heroes to, I wouldn't say manipulate, but he just seems to be like working in the background all the time. He is a fighter. He does lead his armies, but he sort of delegates that to people who are going to get a better result. He's married to Alariel for a year. They've got a good working relationship because he doesn't. You don't have to stay with her after the first year as long as you've produced a daughter. You can go on to see whoever you like. So she goes with Tyrion, but she still respects him. She still, when the princes are all annoyed that he's gone off on another diplomatic mission on his wanderings, she goes to the council meetings and tells them to wrap it in because she's got a significant amount of authority herself. So he's got all this to deal with, and he deals with it pretty well. So B, he's good as Caledon. Yeah, I think he is. I think he's 8 here. So, do I agree with what I put? Anarion is S, Calidor, Caradriel, Belgahadris, and Finnivar is A, Tethlis and Morviel is B, Belshazzar and Belhathor is C, Calidor the second and eighth is F. I want to change any of that? No, I'm sticking with it. And it's not subject to debate, so that's staying as it is. See, not placed is Malekith, which I said I would address at the end, so I will. Right. The idea that it was all a big mistake, and if he'd stayed in the flame a bit longer, then he would have recovered and been the next king, and that's what Assyrian wanted. That was clearly bullshit. That doesn't make any sense in the law, because how they say that, like, oh, they put wards on the subsequent Phoenix Kings to stop them being incinerated. Well, how can a mage overpower the power of a god? That doesn't make any sense. I think it's in the Malekith book where Marathi says, "Oh, they're putting wards on Belshazzar." Anarion never had that. She wasn't there for Anarion's when he went through the shrine. So how does she know what happened? In the book Calidor, it describes how he felt himself being deconstructed and reconstructed in the flames, which didn't hurt him as he's gone through the flames. So why would Assyrian do that if he didn't want him to be king? And in the Tyrion and Teclis books, when they meet Finnivar, they describe pizza topping tears, Hawaiian S, everything else F, easy. Finnivar is described as having an ethereal, godly glow around him as a result of gone through the flame. So that's clearly bullshit. However, if they'd what? Hawaiian is S tier. Where was I? Right. However, if they'd said, right, the world has gone at the end in the end times, if they'd said, right, the world's gone to rat shit, Malekith has realized that he's the last chance of elvenkind and voluntarily goes back into the flame, and Assyrian burns away his armor and the corrupt part of his soul, and then pushes him out the other side of the flame, having reconstituted his body with the last of his power. I don't know what the end times actually happened. I think the gods were dying, and then he became the Eternity King. I wouldn't have a problem with that. That would make sense. That's how I would fix it. But that's just me. Stop trying to talk about elves. This is a live stream entirely about elves. I've promised people elves. We got 17 viewers. That's a record. Well, anyway, that's my opinion on the Phoenix Kings and on Malekith and on the ludicrous idea that, yeah, he was the Phoenix King all along. I'll have it if he goes back into the flame and as a last ditch thing, Assyrian redeems him, and then he can be the Eternity King. That makes more sense to me. Now, do dwarves? They're all F tier. That's as easy as your pizza one. Dark elf apologists and now dwarf lovers. That's the thing about being a high elf. It's just you're being attacked and defend yourself on all sides from the lesser people. Well, anyway, that was my opinion on that. So unless anyone's got any questions, I will leave it there. Inside an hour as well. Right, well, thank you very much for listening to this rambling nonsense about things that aren't real. I'm about to record something about the upcoming narrative event that Triple Crown are doing. This month on the 15th, I think. So I'll try to publish that as soon as possible. Ideally before the event, but I can't guarantee that. So again, thank you very much, everyone, and I'll